These days, we often see monarchs or crown princes marrying people with no blue blood. But if we look at the last century, we notice that the royalty forbade this kind of marriage. So, the monarchs, sometimes too much in love with their mistresses, created the so-called morganatic marriage to circumvent the predicament. But what is a morganatic marriage? Well, a morganatic marriage is one in which a king or queen, prince or princess, betroths someone from a lower social position, someone who does not have the same position or privileges, such as a low-ranking nobleman or a commoner. To understand the meaning of a morganatic marriage, we must travel back in time and understand the context of royalty. We will notice that the term was part of the social and cultural conventions of the Ancien regime, whose goal was to maintain social status equivalence between members of different European royal dynasties. Many marriages were arranged for dynastic or political reasons. Between people of different social levels, the morganatic marriage prevented the titles, privileges, and properties of the upper spouse from passing to the lower spouse and their descendants. Those born of such a union were not considered legitimate children. This type of marriage could occur between a member of royalty and a member of the aristocracy, or between a noble and a commoner. It had its roots in Germanic law and then moved on to other countries. In the Catholic Church, this type of marriage was celebrated normally. Only one ceremonial detail distinguished it. During the celebration, the groom was supposed to take the bride's right hand with his left hand, not with his right. This is why it was known as a marriage by the left hand in German. But which monarchs married commoners, or rather, which ones had a morganatic marriage? Louis XIV, the Sun King, was a true womanizer. Throughout his reign, he had several affairs, some of them notable. Poor Queen Maria Theresa had to put up with his betrayals, but, even worse, he even cheated on his mistresses. Louis XIV had a favorite mistress, Madame de Montespan. However, he ended up having an affair with the nanny of their bastard children. On one of his discreet visits to his children, the king met Françoise d'Aubigné, and they quickly became friends. The closeness forged intimacy between the two, sharing personal experiences as if they were good friends. Before long, proximity became passion. Françoise was 3 years older than Louis XIV. Her background was marked by experiences different from the reality of other female companions of the king. She had a very impoverished background, and her parents had died when she was just 16 years old. She married Paul Scarron, a playwright 25 years her senior, and when she was widowed, she inherited a sum of money that guaranteed her relative financial security. In 1675, the king gave the mistress the title of Marquis de Maintenon, and, mind you, he was still married. Upon the death of his wife in 1683, the king arranged a morganatic marriage to Françoise d'Aubigné in October. This only ended with the death of Louis XVI in 1715. During this time, she became her husband's right hand, was praised for her humble and selfless personality, and even set up a charity organization for poor women. Despite reports of his intense sexuality, there are no known betrayals by the king during his long-lasting marriage to Francois, who was also never interested in anyone else. She died in 1719, 4 years after the king's death, without ever having any official position in the monarchy. Franz Ferdinand was one of the most important European aristocrats of his time, and also one of the richest men in Europe. He traveled all over the world, devoting himself to his greatest passion, hunting. But his peaceful life changed radically in 1896, when his father passed away. He became the Crown Prince of Austria, Hungary, and Bohemia. Heirs to the throne usually cannot do what they want. But Franz Ferdinand showed Emperor Franz Joseph that he had his own will, disobeying all orders coming from the imperial palace. A perfect example of his stubbornness was the way he chose his wife, Sophie Chotek. Although Sophie was a Czech aristocrat with a family tree rooted in the 13th century, expectations dictated that the crown prince was to establish marriage ties with the daughter of the king or prince, never with the countess. So, it was not surprising that both kept their relationship in utmost secrecy. The scandal exploded in 1898 when Sophie was the lady-in-waiting of the Archduchess Elizabeth. The Archduchess had only one possible explanation for the frequent visits to her home by the crown prince. Franz Ferdinand was interested in one of her daughters. One day, she found his little medallion and could not control her curiosity. Inside it, she saw the portrait of Sophie, the mere lady-in-waiting. This shocked the imperial court. The Archduchess dismissed Sophie, and the emperor threatened to exclude the couple's children from the right of succession to the throne if the affair persisted. Franz Ferdinand agreed. Surprised, the emperor gave him a year to rethink the matter, but he did not change his decision. The wedding was celebrated in 1900, but the only members of the imperial family present were Ferdinand's stepmother and her daughters. Edward IV's queen consort, Elizabeth Woodville, grandmother Henry VIII, was the first commoner to become queen consort of England. When she met the king, she was a widow with 2 children. The widow told the king that she would not submit sexually without marrying and, as a result, becoming Queen of England. This monarch was unpopular and proud, but her dynasty would eventually live on forever. Through her daughter, Elizabeth of York, the Tudor dynasty was formed. Elizabeth Woodville's blood ran in the veins of many great monarchs. One legend says that Elizabeth learned that the king was hunting in Whittlewood Forest. She waited under a tree with her 2 sons from her first marriage. After her husband died, Elizabeth was in a dire financial situation and wanted to ask the king for help. When he walked by, Elizabeth threw herself at his feet, and the monarch fell in love with her. At first, he did not want to marry her, but to make her his mistress. Edward was so captivated by Elizabeth that he married the widow, deeply angering the Earl of Warwick, who was planning a French wedding for the young king. Edward and Elizabeth were secretly married on May 1st, 1464, and Elizabeth was crowned Queen of England on May 26, 1465. Last on this list is Pedro of Orleans Braganza, eldest son of Princess Elizabeth and the Count of Eu. The boy lived in Brazil, educated to one day be his mother's successor, but his life changed completely in 1889 with the proclamation of the Republic. With the end of the monarchy, the boy was exiled along with his family. He went to live at the castle of Eu, Normandy, France. Later, he studied at the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where he served in the army of the country in which he was exiled. In 1908, Pedro of Orleans Braganza married Elizabeth Dobrzinski, a young woman who did not have a noble title. The union was celebrated in Versailles, France, after 8 years of courtship and engagement. At the time, the Prince of Grão-Pará chose to abdicate the throne, when Brazil was already a republic, and make the marriage official. This went against the wishes of the imperial family, but led to his brother, Luís of Orleans Braganza, becoming the new successor to the Brazilian monarchy. That's it, folks. Want part 2? Then please comment. Do you know any other monarchs who made morganatic marriages? Comment as well.